Welcome, everybody, back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Brabbert. Alongside me is Logan Camden. And believe it or not, we are less than a month away from the NBA season getting tipped off. So we've got to start getting into some season preview content now, don't we, Logan? That's what we're going to do. We're going to go a division at a time and talk about every single NBA team before the season gets started. And we will get things going, Logan, with one of the strongest and most interesting divisions in basketball this year. We're talking about the Northwest today, and we'll start from the top here. Maybe this answer seems obvious, maybe not though, because the competition really is that stiff. Who do you have on top of this division for the 2026 season, Logan?
The competition is stiff, but I have the Oklahoma City Thunder repeating as Northwest Division champions, and I think the real question is just how much better is Oklahoma City going to be? And is it going to be reflected in their record? This is a team, Carson, that last year was 68-14, and they faced a lot of adversity, right? This wasn't like a peachy keen, easy 68-14. That's what I want to hammer home. I mean, for the beginning of this season, they're missing Isaiah Hartenstein. They're missing Chet Holmgren. They have Jalen Williams fill in at the 5 spot for a majority of the beginning of the year. And,
well, yeah, like a handful of games.
I mean, and then, well, I mean, eventually they do get Hartenstein, but you miss Holmgren for a large portion of the year. And then they almost don't miss a beat. Like, it's really impressive to me that this team was able to be this successful while facing that kind of injury luck. But the big question for me this next season really does focus on the young guys. It's really rare for a team to be this dominant and this young. Like, the big swing factor to me is just how much better do some of these young guys get? And it starts, I think, with Chet Holmgren offensively with what he brings you, but it can also go down the roster to a guy like Cason Wallace, like Aaron Wiggins. Does J-Dub get any better, right? Does Isaiah Joe get better? You've got Nikola Topic, who should be healthy this season. So I do think there's a lot of room for improvement for a team that is so young and was so successful last season and just won the title. So to me, it's not, is this team going to be great? Are they going to fall off? Is there going to be some championship hangover? I'm just kind of looking, how much better is this team going to be this season? Because I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I just don't know how it's going to be reflected in their record.
I also obviously have the Thunder atop this division. I think that they are the best team in the league. I have them winning 64 games this year as my 1 seed. I will say all my record predictions flexible to change by maybe a game or two once all is said and done, because I got to make sure the league ends with a 500 even record, which I haven't done yet. But regardless, the Thunder will have the best record in the league in my preseason predictions by multiple games. I think it's going to be another utterly dominant regular season for them. They retain every single rotation player from a team that just had an utterly dominant championship season, and they were the youngest team to win it all since 1977. So that's where you talk about the opportunity for improvement, potentially significant improvement from a team that already was so great. It's really a rare thing in the history of this game to see. And I do want to get into some of those swing factors that can ultimately determine what this team's absolute ceiling is. But first off, the reason that they have to be viewed as, to me, still the favorite to win the title this year is because that all-time great defense that they had last year is going to be replicated. They had a -7 relative defensive rating in the regular season. That was the best by any champion since the '04 Pistons. And now they're actually going to have their best defender for hopefully the entire season. You mentioned they had 50 games without Chet. We have never seen a defensive unit with this level of speed. It is absolutely absurd, and this level of ability to cause chaos defensively. They have elite switchability. They have elite rim protection. They have so many high-quality defenders, but what they do in a truly one-of-a-kind way is force turnovers, make opposing teams uncomfortable, speed them up, and then turn defense into offense. It's the greatest strength of their identity as a team. They overwhelm you in that way, and they have an answer for everybody. They can excel in every single matchup on the defensive end. That was their biggest strength last year. That's going to remain their biggest strength this year. But they also have an all-time offensive engine in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who, by the way, had one of the great guard seasons we've ever seen last year. and can really only improve. His regular season was flawless, but when we talk about the totality of his campaign, he can be more consistent this time around in the playoffs as a three-point shooter, and I'd actually expect him to be. He can be more consistent as a decision maker and playmaker. He had some high highs there in the playoffs and figured things out as series went along, but he started some of those series a little bit slower as a decision maker. Now that he's seen a lot of these defensive coverages, he's got another year of experience in a deep playoff run all the way to the title. I think he'll be even cleaner and more consistent there. But this past season, this dude already got them to a 128 offensive rating in the minutes that he played without J-Dub. With him as the lone creator, he is so ridiculously efficient as a scorer. He can do so with such overwhelming volume as a self-creator while never turning the ball over, while demanding such ridiculous amounts of defensive attention that he can make simple reads to create great shots for his teammates, that it's just an incredible formula for this team to run it back. You've got one of the best defenses we've ever seen, and you've got an offensive engine who can do that for you, who can single-handedly elevate you to that level on that side of the ball, even though there are some questions around him. That's how you win the title, despite the team shooting under 34% from three in the playoffs, and despite Chet's offensive inconsistencies, and even some of J-Dub's offensive inconsistencies, although he played quite well down the stretch in the playoffs. It's just the best bet of any team to be able to achieve the kind of dominance that they did last year again. That being said, there are a lot of interesting aspects to how OKC can go from the favorite this year, running it back, to an overwhelming favorite, which they absolutely have the potential to do. What's the first key swing factor that stands out to you there, Logan?
I think it is the improvement that we get from Chet Holmgren. I mean, I think that's the thing that could kick this team up a notch. When I look at, because I don't. You talk about swing factors. The Thunder are just so solid. Like, they're rock solid. They are as rock solid of a champion that I can remember in a long time. You know, we haven't had repeat champions in, what is it? Is it 7, 8 seasons now? It's been a long time since the Warriors.
17, 18 Warriors.
So that's what the Thunder are chasing, right? They are chasing the first team to be able to do that since that team. And that was a historically great champion. I expect this to be another historically great season, and they have such tremendous personnel, but I think the thing that could kick them up a notch really is Chet imposing himself physically and just asserting himself more offensively. The Thunder do have an established hierarchy, which is what I think is interesting about Chet getting himself more involved and being more impactful offensively, because it is so much Shai is going to dictate every possession offensively. And then when Shai's not on the court, J-Dub's going to take over some. And even when they overlap, J-Dub's going to run some offense. The next step really to me is weaponizing Chet to his fullest extent, involving him in the action more consistently, letting him dictate and run pick and roll at a higher volume. Not that the Thunder necessarily need this, but I could think it could just add a new dimension that would make their offense more dynamic and more dangerous and more volatile. And Chet's super talented. I mean, before he got injured at the beginning of this year, it was a really small sample size, but he was getting downhill. He was being aggressive. He was physically big bodying guys. Really encouraging stuff. And so that's the leap to me. And then seeing that manifest itself not only from Chet, but Chet and J-Dub both when it comes into the playoffs. I thought they were really good playoff runs from both of those young players, from Chet and J-Dub, especially what J-Dub gave you in the NBA Finals. But I think it can be more consistent, and I think they can just be more impactful offensively throughout 4 series. So that, to me, is the biggest swing factor in the positive way to where this team could be a lot better. If Chet takes a major offensive leap and starts imposing himself more, and if he's just healthy, because I think consistency is, especially in basketball, can really be interrelated with just being available. And Chet has unfortunately gotten bit by the injury bug a few times now in his career. I think a big part of that development is just going to be him staying available and being on the court. And then with that, I think a lesser swing factor is J-Dub's offensive improvement, just because I think J-Dub is closer to the fully realized version of what he's going to be, more so than Chet.
Chet is absolutely the first guy who I look at with his team, and specifically offensively, because defensively I already think that he is a top 2 guy on the planet. I thought that what he did in this entire season, but especially in the playoffs, was utterly exceptional on that side of the ball. but there is clearly significant room for offensive improvement. And this is a guy who is oozing with talent on that side of the ball. He has got genuinely unique speed for being 7'1". He has unique fluidity and body control for that size. His ball handling is very impressive. And so you have these moments of him being able to put the ball on the floor, get past people off the bounce, spin in the lane, finish with his length, and it's all so impressive. And then you add on top of that the dimension of the legitimate jump shooting that you get from him and the play finishing that you get from him around the rim, and there's just so much ability there. But when you get him in a playoff environment against really high-level physical defenses, we saw some of his issues exposed in the playoffs this past year. So there's a number of key areas I'm looking at him when it comes to his progression. Can he get more comfortable handling under pressure? Because there is a difference between being an awesome ball handler for 7'1" and being a guy who, in a playoff environment against physical defenses, applying ball pressure, is actually comfortable enough putting the ball on the floor to create advantages, get past people, not feel like you got to turn your back to the basket and stop your drive. And those were issues for Chet this past year. He was challenged in that way. He's got to be able to actually do more off the bounce in the playoffs going forward to take that next step, and a lot of that is related to his ball handling, but also driving through physicality. Got to get a little bit better. And also just his decision-making, his processing. There were times where we saw him force drives that he shouldn't have. There were times where we saw him miss reads, and I was disappointed in that because I viewed Chet as a pretty good passing prospect for being a big. I think we've seen flashes of that with him running the big on big pick and roll, right? He can make some of those reads and passes to Hartenstein that not a lot of bigs can make, but he's got to be more consistent there as a processor, as a passer. And he is a very good jump shooter. There's no denying that, right? We see it in the regular season. This guy shoots 38% from three on solid volume. You see it with the free throw numbers overall in the very high 70s. But then we have seen him struggle in back-to-back postseasons as a jump shooter. The thing that I specifically look at is his ability to speed up the release on that jumper, because despite his height, his release point is not very high and it is pretty slow. So sometimes he can struggle shooting against contests. He can get affected in a way that you would like to see him not be affected going forward. And I just think there's a little bit of mechanical work to be done overall. The other thing that stands out to me is sometimes his shot comes out very flat and he can leave it short, especially I think when he's a little bit nervous or maybe tired, doesn't fully have his legs under him. So we know the shooting talent that he is, but I also don't think you can ignore some of these issues that have popped up in back-to-back postseasons now. We already saw him work on his mechanics going into year 2. I'd like to see some more tinkering going into year 3. Those are, to me, like the foundational pieces that he's got to get better at. And then kind of the ultimate upside with him is, okay, can he become a legitimate mismatch attacker for you? Because right now he just doesn't have the strength. He doesn't have the post game to punish switches. He's not going to beat guards with his quickness and off the bounce game. That has to be done more so through physicality, leveraging his size. I don't really see him adding significantly there this year, maybe down the line, but he's always going to be a skinny SOB. The post game hasn't developed for him up to this point, so we'll see. Again, that's kind of like a over-the-top skill that he could add. And then I would like to see him improve as a screener. This is another thing where, again, slight frame, but he basically slips every screen, and he's never going to be Isaiah Hartenstein as a screener, obviously, but if he could just be a bit more physical, create a bit more separation for the ball handler, spring those guys free more, I think he would be much more viable overall as a pick and roll partner, where he has all of the scoring dimensions you want there, right? As a pick and pop big, as a fluid roller to the rim with great size who can absolutely finish around the basket. But if he's not freeing up his guys, then he's not going to be that primary pick and roll partner because they're not really creating advantages as they would like out of pick and roll. So I'm high on Chet. I'm very high on Chet. I always have been. And I am optimistic because I think you said it well, man. Health is a significant component in all this. I will not be convinced that it was a coincidence that Chet came out the gates this year looking like a monster offensively, hyper-aggression, showing a level of production and confidence that we hadn't seen from him before, being so effective as a driver with more actions designed for him to run through him. and then he gets hurt. Not just that, he breaks his pelvis 10 games into the year, has to come back after missing 50 games, and he doesn't look the same offensively. You give him a full, healthy offseason, and I do think that we'll see improvement. And if he gets to a place where he's like a consistent 19, 20 point per game scorer, it's hard to imagine anybody beating OKC. That level of production from Chet with all of the different good things he can do for you offensively, just an absolute monster.
I thought people were way too hard on Chet when it came to the playoffs, too, because I knew he had his struggles offensively. But I think when you look at his entire season within context and what he was able to do coming back from that pelvic injury, it's really impressive because I think it speaks to a level of just physical and mental toughness and resilience that Chet has to come back from that. Like, that is an injury that not only is going to hinder you physically when it does come time to come back, but it's going to hurt you mentally and it's going to hinder your confidence. And so I get that he hasn't lived up to the lofty expectations offensively that were set for him when he was coming out of college. But I thought the level that he was able to reach defensively and be good enough offensively was really impressive when you consider all the context of the entirety of the season.
He was the best defender in the playoffs, and I don't even think that that's arguable. So the guy was still delivering you great value, but I have consistently said Chet has top 10 potential, and his path to reaching that is obviously all about the offense because defensively, he's already one of the absolute best on the planet. So I'm not expecting a monumental offensive leap this year from Chet. I think it's going to be a multi-year process for him. But I do think that he can improve on the margins in some of these areas and be better next time we see him in a playoff run. I do also look at J-Dub's offensive consistency as just something to monitor with this team. Again, we're talking about things that can put them over the top because Chet already had offensive issues this past year in the playoffs and they won the title. And J-Dub still was up and down offensively in the playoffs, although he finished strong. But they won the title, right? They got to a game 7 against Denver when he played really well and he was really good from that point forward. But they got there in spite of J-Dub being pretty terrible through the first 6 games of that series. But from that point forward, starting with game 7, he gave you 23, 6, and 4 on 55% true shooting over the last 13 games of the playoffs. I thought that was encouraging. I thought that was impressive. And I loved seeing him play all the way downhill late in the playoffs, committing to legitimately pressuring the rim, getting all the way to the basket, getting the free throw line at a higher rate. I want to see that more consistently from J-Dub because he's got the mid-range game. He loves the mid-range game, but sometimes he falls in love with it too much and he can become overly reliant on his difficult shot making. I thought he was able to give himself a higher offensive floor late in the playoffs by playing with that sort of downhill force. I also am looking at how consistent his jumper is this year because 2024, J-Dub shot the ball at an elite clip. He averaged 1.13 points per jump shot. In 2025, that number dropped to 0.99. That's the difference between an 84th percentile efficiency jump shooter and 47th percentile. So it's a big difference. He went through a pretty brutal slump last year as a jump shooter, and he broke out of it, but then he shot the ball pretty poorly from deep in the playoffs. It was certainly inconsistent, and he ended up at like 30% from beyond the arc. So that's an important component for him. I do think he'll have something of a bounce back as a jump shooter. And then obviously, like, he's just very crucial in the non-Shai minutes. He got them to a 114 offensive rating when he was on the floor without Shai this year. That number dramatically improved as the year went on, but he is so vital as a creator there because they just don't have another ball handler and shot creator who can step up in those minutes. Overall, I feel good about the level that J-Dub played at in the most important moments in games last year, and I feel positive about him also probably making some marginal improvements. He doesn't have the same potential for growth or need for growth offensively that a Chet Holmgren does, but I still think he can get a little bit more consistent in some of these areas. There's one other guy, though, Logan, who you do look at, and he's a wild card in all of this. Nikola Topic, you mentioned briefly. What are you expecting to see from him this year, and what potential value could he bring to the Thunder?
I'm really excited to talk about Topic. Last thing I wanted to bring up on J-Dub real quick, though.
Yeah.
The reason is just there's a little bit of inherent volatility with the shot selection that J-Dub likes in those bench minutes is he is just so reliant on that mid-range jumper, and he's not as great of an advantage creator as SGA is, and that's why you see that little bit of slip when SGA is off the court. But I do think he can get better in those areas. Like, he's so good at getting to those looks. I really do think I think J-Dub's going to continue to grow as like in terms of his touch and mid-range and tough-range shot making. So there is a leap there. But I'm really excited about Topic, man, especially with what we saw out of him in Summer League. Granted, you need to take Summer League with a grain of salt. It is competitive basketball. These are guys fighting for their lives, but it isn't the stiffest competition. That being said, Topic has a level of poise and control of the game in the half court that I really, really like. Not even in the half court, with the ball in his hands. I'll say it like that. Full court, when he gets the ball, when he's bringing it up, the guy's a really great hit-ahead passer and really great at pushing the tempo, which I think for a team with the roster construction like Oklahoma City with an elite defense, you slot a guy like Topic in there, you could create some really easy stop-and-go buckets where they get a stop, boom, Topic is flying up the court and kicking to an open shooter, or he's just throwing the ball up to a guy who's sprinting down the floor. So I think he should be really good for creating transition opportunities. But in the half court, this guy's 6'6". He's kind of chunky. He's strong. Like, he can physically move guys around, especially out of the pick and roll.
How about compact, Logan? Chunky,
yeah,
how about compact?
I just meant, like, he can bump guys around. I didn't mean it as a negative term, but I like it. I like my ball handlers to be a little bit thicker, to have that kind of strength. Because strength is just something that you can't stop. If you can't match up with that, Topic is going to move you a little bit around. He's very methodical. He's very patient, and he's very poised. I love his control in the half court and just the way he works in the intermediate areas to get to his shots. Scoring isn't his specialty, though, to me. It really is the playmaking and decision-making where he can just see these angles and these cross-court passes, and he's always going to find open shooters. To me, the bread and butter of his scoring skill set is his touch and his layups. When he gets, like, inside 10 feet and can really use his body to bump guys and then get into his layups. So I think the big swing thing for him as a player is obviously his shot, how reliable he is going to be as a perimeter shooter and scorer. But I like him a lot more than a guy that maybe you would compare him to that the Thunder drafted a couple years ago in Josh Giddey, where I trust him more with the ball in his hands. I think he's going to be a better scorer, and I think he can just physically impose himself and create more advantages than a guy like Giddey can. I just think he's a better scorer than Giddey is. And don't get me wrong, I thought Giddey was improved this year, but I do think Topic is going to be better, and I really like the physicality and the confidence that he plays with. And when you're talking about a guy like Jalen Williams, where if you're going to criticize anything of his, it would be him in the bench units where he is the lone creator. And so you look at this Thunder team and what they need, it really is a guy like Topic who, unfortunately, the Thunder just keep getting bit by these injury bugs for their rookies. Chet misses an entire year with an injury. Topic misses a year with an entire injury. Their rookie that I was very fond of, Thomas Sorber, is going to miss the entire year with an injury. So it is unfortunate, but it would have been nice to see him last year. I think he is going to add a new dimension to this bench unit and kick the offense up a notch in his minutes, man. I'm really excited to see Topic on the floor with this team.
There's not a lot that you could criticize about this Thunder team. There's very few needs that you could point to. But one of the couple of things that we have talked about is the value of adding another ball handler, because there is such a burden on Shai and there is such a burden on J-Dub. If you look at just the volume that those guys take on when the other guy is off the floor, it's pretty insane. Per 75 possessions, well, this is just unbelievable. Shai is a basketball god, dude. Without J-Dub, 40 points, 7.5 assists, 67% true shooting, and the Thunder had a 128 offensive rating in the regular season.
I'm sorry, what is that stat?
That's per 75 possessions. When Shai was on the floor without J-Dub, he averaged 40 points, 7.5 assists, 67% true shooting, and led them to a 128 offensive rating.
That's crazy, bro.
It's absolutely unfathomable how great he was. And then you look at J-Dub in the minutes without Shai, and his volume is also massive. It's obviously not nearly that, but 29 points per 75, 7 assists per 75, 56% true shooting, and overall got them to be good enough in those minutes when he was the primary creator on the floor. So you look at that and you say, okay, well, those results overall are quite good. And in the regular season, they were. Shai did his job at an A++ level. J-Dub did his job at whatever, like a B+ level. And they were one of the elite regular season offenses. But they ran into more offensive issues in the playoffs. They still won the title, but it wasn't as seamless and smooth and consistently elite for them on that side of the ball. And I do think part of that is at times such an extreme reliance on Shai without other proven creators, ball handlers, and an over-reliance on J-Dub when he isn't always the most consistent as a second option or as a first option in the non-Shai minutes. So there's just moments where you felt like it'd be nice to have one more guy on the floor who could handle, who could make a play. Topic theoretically could be that guy. And you mentioned the Giddey comparison. I think that's one that we saw a lot of. I actually remember it's one that you made, Logan, about Topic as a prospect. And I said, no, I like Topic more. And here's why. Significantly more. I liked him. Number one, I think the shooting indicators with him are significantly better than they were for Giddey as a prospect. Topic was an elite free throw shooter, and his mechanics are not broken in the way that they were with Giddey. Now, they're still not super fluid, and he shot the ball poorly from deep in Summer League. So it's still a big question with him, but I do like the indicators there more than I did with Giddey. But the bigger difference probably is that I just think he's a much better downhill scorer. As a driver, as a finisher, this guy has consistently been very effective, as you mentioned. So the overall scoring skill set is just better with him. And then he has all the same inventive, creative passing brilliance that Giddey did, but he pairs that with more of an actual scoring threat and ability to get into the paint, pressure the defense in that way. He's got the really good size to make a lot of those impressive reads that only a bigger ball handler could see as well. So there's a lot to like with him offensively, but still, even though like his summer league was impressive in some ways, and there were some great highlights, and he gave you 11, 3, and 6, he also did shoot 33% from the field and 21% from three. And that's against summer league competition. And we talk about generally the standard with year two guys, even though Topic, well, he's very young, and also he's going into basically his rookie year. Nevertheless, he was drafted in 2024. And generally, we want to see those guys kind of look a level above the competition in Summer League. I don't know that I could say that with him, and I think that you still saw some of the flaws that he does have as a shooter and as a scorer, and that's going to be the question. Can he shoot and score at the necessary level to be an actual bench ball handler for this team, to give them 12 to 15 minutes and to actually make an impact? And especially, can he justify that sort of a role when the bar for a subpar defender to get on the floor for OKC is so ridiculously high? You look at a guy like Isaiah Joe, one of the elite shooters in basketball. It's hard for him to get on the floor. Like, the depth here is just so ridiculous, and they hang their hat above all else on having no defensive weak points and being able to absolutely cause havoc on that side of the floor. So if you are costing them in that way, and you're not justifying it with real offensive value, and there's questions about, okay, what can Topic do off ball when he's playing alongside a Shai or a J-Dub if he can't make shots off the catch? Like, I genuinely don't know what we're going to see out of Topic this year. I am optimistic about his talent, and I like his potential to fit into this role. And by the way, I think even if Giddey had been able to fully embrace like just a bench ball handler role, that would have been better. But I don't like Giddey. I like Topic more. But the point was, he also was insistent upon, I want to be a starter, which meant he was being put in a role that was even worse for him considering his skill set. I do think that Topic just has more offensive juice as a scorer potentially, but it also wouldn't surprise me at all if he just wasn't in the playoff rotation this year, if he wasn't quite ready, because the bar is really damn high to get on the floor. What I will say, though, is when we talk about the superpowers of this OKC team, absolutely, it is one of the best defenses we've ever seen. Absolutely, it is Shai being a top 3 player in the game. Absolutely, and one of the best offensive players that we've seen. It is also supreme lineup versatility. And if Topic is what we hope and think he could be this year, then he is another look that they can throw at you, right? there's so many looks that they can give you. They can go double big. They can go Chet at the 5, which is when I think they're at their best. They can go full-on small ball for short stretches, and there are so many different bench players who they can implement. They can go with Caruso for big minutes, which I think they'll do again in the playoffs because he's so destructive defensively. They can go with an Aaron Wiggins or an Isaiah Joe for more of an offensive punch. There's a lot of options. Topic potentially could be another one of those guys bringing a unique dimension of ball handling for this team and a little bit more offensive juice.
I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, that was the last point I was going to make on OKC is the fact that they just have so many different looks that they can go with. Their guard lineups, their forward lineups, if they're going Chet, if they're going double big. I think it is a super strength of this team. And you make a great point about Topic, too. I mean, if Topic pops, it's like icing on the cake, right? It's like garnish for something. Like it's just extra. It's just added value that you have in here. Even if Topic doesn't crack it, I mean, I still think this team can win the title. Like he's not question. Like he's not that huge of a swing factor, but he could kick them up a notch if he's really solid year one.
Not only can they win the title without Topic being a rotation
I'm expecting
piece,
it. Yeah, they're definitely
still be
my favorite for sure.
That's what I want to hammer home here. We are talking about these swing factors. They are the difference between the Thunder being the favorite to win the title and a team that is like so great that I can't see anybody else beating them. They're not there right now because I do think a team we're about to talk about very shortly got significantly better and poses a major threat. But I absolutely see a world in which I look at the Thunder and I'm like, there's just no way that anybody's beating them. And already I just couldn't pick anybody to beat them because their formula is so proven. And lineup versatility, man, it is at a premium in today's NBA. Depth is at a premium in today's NBA. The ability to mix and match and throw different looks at different opponents and be able to counter and disrupt whatever they want to do, it's so damn important. And the Thunder are just the best at it in basketball. The one final swing factor I would mention with them is their three-point shooting as a team. Because if you just look at a lot of the key contributors here, Shai, Chet, J-Dub, Caruso, Cason Wallace, even Aaron Wiggins, although he had a very good three-point shooting season, really increased his volume. Like, all of these guys can be kind of up and down as three-point shooters. But overall, last two regular seasons, they've had elite shooting seasons in the regular season. They were top 6 in threes made, top 6 in three-point percentage in the regular season last year. And then they struggled in the playoffs and they still won the title. I do believe the playoffs last year, the level they shot at, was pretty much their floor overall as a shooting team. But I don't think you can deny that they can have lulls there. And I think it'll be better this time around in the playoffs, but it is not impossible that they have some ups and downs there. And if you're facing a really strong opponent, maybe that could be the thing that gets them. But I still just think that their margin is easily the greatest in basketball with a player the caliber of Shai, with second and third stars who I think are going to be better this year, with the best depth in the sport, with the best lineup versatility, with a defense that is like so clearly the best unit in basketball. Whoever ends up being the best offense, like the difference between them and the pack on that side of the ball will not be the same as the difference between the Thunder and every other group defensively. It's just such a ridiculously high floor that it gives them. Their ability to dominate the possession game we saw so consistently. They're just getting up more shots than their opponents, and they're turning these turnovers into high quality transition opportunities. I'm just talking about all the things that make the Thunder great, but I don't want us to forget that. I don't want us to look at the improvements of some of these other teams and say, oh, maybe I'll get cheeky. Maybe I'll pick somebody other than OKC. I just couldn't do it. When I think Shai will be better in the playoffs this year, Chet will be better, I think they'll shoot better, and they retained literally everybody from a team that already won the title, won 68 games, had the second best net rating in NBA history. Considering all that, I just have to pick the Thunder this year, and it's just going to be a question of how dominant, how great they are, how much they can improve in all of these areas. And again, it's insane to be talking about improvement from a team that was already that great.
Real quick, just because I don't think I said this off top, I have the Thunder winning 65 games, and they're going to be my 1 seed and title favorite as well.
Look, I'm not going to compare them to the peak Warriors, okay? That's ridiculous. That's the greatest team ever assembled when you're talking about 2017 specifically. We never seen a collection of top-end talent like what they had 2017, 2018, and would have had 2019 if KD didn't get hurt. But there is kind of a feeling with the Thunder right now of just expecting absolute regular season dominance that I haven't had about a team since the 2015 to 2017 Warriors. And it is because they're so damn talented and they can still get better. But it is also because, like, they're so young and they play with so much energy and they've got such great depth that it's like, not only are they the best team come playoffs, they're even better than everybody else in the regular season because they go full throttle, because that defensive identity is so relentless night after night after night. And I just don't see that changing this year. Like, yes, reigning champions will take their foot off the gas a fair bit throughout the course of NBA history in the regular season. The Thunder are like the last team that I would expect to do that because this is part of their identity. They're basketball psychos. When you got Caruso, when you got Case and Wallace, when you got J-Dub playing big minutes, like, it's just what they do. They want to be the best versions of themselves every night, and I think we'll see that again this year. Let's move on, though, Logan, to the next team in this Northwest Division. Who do you have finishing second in the division?
I've got the Denver Nuggets. I've got them improving by 5 wins over their total from the previous season. I've got them at 55 wins. I'm really excited about a lot of the additions that Denver made this offseason. That is kind of the storyline for Denver moving on. Is really the added depth. The on-off differential for the Denver Nuggets with and without Jokic over the last 4 seasons is an average of over 20.
It's insane.
It's ridiculous. And so when you consider, how great this team has been in spite of their bench and in spite of their depth, I am expecting big improvement on both sides of the ball. So there's a lot of things to be encouraged by. One of them is obviously the passing of the torch, so to speak, from Michael Porter Jr. to Cam Johnson. I think Cam Johnson is a much better basketball player than Michael Porter Jr. I think he adds a lot of new dimensions to this offensive attack and is just a more versatile and just better player than MPJ. They had a bunch of new depth pieces, Jonas Valanciunas, Tim Hardaway Jr. They bring back Bruce Brown. And so this is really, really exciting, man, for a team that has who I consider to be the best player on the planet to add key additions in specific areas. The Nuggets have been tied 6th in fewest three-pointers made per game over the last 4 seasons. And you think about a team that has such a crisp offensive attack, they just churn out elite offenses year after year because of a guy like Nikola Jokic. They don't even have that kind of high-volume punch, right, that big swing factor where they can just make a bunch of threes in a single game. That's a superpower for a lot of teams in today's NBA, and that's just something that Denver really hasn't tapped into over the past 5 seasons. Just something they haven't been able to do because of some of their limitations. And so I think some of these additions, specifically the volume that we could see this team shoot the ball from behind the arc, could really make this offense a lot better. And that's one of the areas I'm most excited for this team. But from a team that's consistently had one of the worst benches in basketball to a team that I think has, maybe not one of the best, but a much improved bench. I think it's really, really encouraging, man. And I'm just excited for Jokic too, man. Maybe that guy can catch a breather every couple of games now.
It is certainly the best bench of the Jokic era for Denver, and that's so significant. I have the Nuggets winning 58 games. I have them as my 2 seed. And with this unfortunate Fred VanVleet injury for the Rockets, I think Denver emerges as the clear biggest threat to OKC in the West. I already had them as my number 2 contender in the entire NBA, but now it feels like these two are separate from everybody else in the West. They are above the pack, and the Thunder are clearly number 1, but the Nuggets are also very clearly number 2. I love what they did this offseason. I thought they were big winners. Logan, their starting 5 last year already had a 125 offensive rating in the minutes that they played together. And now you take that same core, but you upgrade the MPJ spot, and you're still getting elite shooting value and size from Cam Johnson. He's not quite MPJ as a shooter, but he is still one of the best shooters on the planet. And he's bringing you more ball handling, more playmaking. Like, he's only solid in those areas, but maybe underratedly so when you look at some of the creation that he did bring for the Nets last year. and just an overall higher basketball IQ on both sides of the ball, more consistent competence and effort defensively. And you got to keep in mind that MPJ was just brutal in the playoffs, and we can acknowledge the AC sprain, and nevertheless, the floor with him when he wasn't making shots was so damn low. He could be a negative. I think the floor with Cam Johnson is much higher, and I think he is a more versatile, better all-around player who nevertheless does the same stuff that MPJ did very well at a really high level. There's a drop-off as a rebounder, but he's just the guy who I would rather have in that spot. So I look at the formula here. Jokic alone, when he was on the court last year, produced a 128 offensive rating. He's doing unparalleled stuff to elevate team offense, I would argue, in the history of this game, and he is playing at the highest level that he's ever been at. Last year, taking on even more scoring volume than ever before, showing a level as a jump shooter that we had never seen before, where he shot 45% on threes if you take out heaves, which, by the way, are not going to be counted anymore going forward against a player's shooting percentage. He's the best offensive player we've ever seen, and he's playing his best basketball ever. So if you put competence around him, like, the Nuggets are going to be a threat because of that. But this group around him now, I really do love as a fit. Like, obviously, the two-man game with Jamal has been the foundation of this team's excellence for years. They have such beautiful complementary games. But then I look at Aaron Gordon and Christian Brown. They are both awesome as cutters and finishers, and that is a premium skill set to have alongside Jokic. Everybody cuts more, is smarter and more active about it when they play with Jokic, but these two guys are really awesome there in that role. I also feel good about the shooting, and obviously the addition of a THJ is super significant there. It's so valuable for them to be able to turn to a guy like that who did not exist on this bench last year and say, okay, if Christian Brown is struggling shooting, bam, we can go to THJ and he's kind of a flamethrower. Regardless, having a guy like that for the bench unit, it's also valuable. But also, the dramatic improvement from Aaron Gordon last year, I'm excited to see hopefully a full season of him healthy, because it was one of the most impressive late career single season jump shooting leaps I've ever seen from a player, and I do think it's legitimate. I think he is legitimately very good now. So the overall shooting that they have, playing off of Jokic when he draws doubles in the post, when they try to guard the two-man game with him and Jamal with three players, and somebody's got to make a read, Jokic has to find somebody off the short roll. I just think the shooting around them is more reliable, and now they do also have, as part of that, a more versatile offensive weapon in Cam Johnson. There's not an offense I like more in basketball. The Thunder have the best defense, no question. The Nuggets, I expect to have the best offense. And part of that is, we know that they're going to produce ridiculous results when Jokic is on the court, but they did last year. They had a 128 offensive rating with him on the floor. They were a plus 11 net team in his minutes. They were a negative 11 net team without him. They were an abysmal offense without him. Now, with the best bench they've ever had, I just think that they can post solid results in those minutes. I think they could be close to even in those minutes. And there's a big difference between dominating the minutes with your best player, getting dominated in the minutes without him, compared to still dominating the minutes with your best player on the court, maybe even more so, because I like the group around him more, and actually being able to play pretty close to even in the minutes without him, not feeling like you are so reliant on winning the Jokic minutes convincingly. In the playoffs against really good competition, the Nuggets were even in the minutes with Jokic, and they had a negative 19 net rating without him. So when you go from that to Jonas Valanciunas, who according to ESPN is the 87th best player in the NBA, Logan, which is absolutely insane.
In 2019, maybe?
Even then, man, I don't know. But today, one of the craziest rankings and takes I've ever seen. But he is one of the best backup centers in basketball. That's something they've never had. This is legitimately a team that for the last couple years, they've been like, all right, DeAndre Jordan is our backup center. And then we get to the playoffs and we don't have a backup center. We'll go Aaron Gordon at the 5. Like, having a guy who can play 12 quality minutes a game, impose himself physically, be super efficient as a scorer, dominate the glass, brings a little bit of passing feel. Like, that's just such a massive upgrade. Bringing in a legitimately awesome shooter like THJ, who fills such an important void for this team because there has been that lack of volume three-point shooting. That's such a huge upgrade. Bruce Brown Jr., he can bring some of that Swiss Army knife value, doing a little bit of everything for you. And I just think is a quality role player who particularly fits well in Denver. We saw his value in the 2023 run. Nice to bring him back. And then it's like Peyton Watson, Julian Strother. Those guys are a year older. They're a little bit of a better bet, therefore, to be more reliable rotational pieces. I'm not saying that they're going to be significantly better, but I think they'll be a little bit better. And there's a lot less pressure on them to have to actually play important minutes for you. And Logan, the last guy who I look at with this bench unit I'm excited about, Deron Holmes, man. He's here. He's going to play. And I was impressed by him in Summer League. He gave you 13 and 10 on 52% from the field, 42% from three. I loved this pick at the time because they've so desperately needed a backup big for years. And now they actually have multiple looks that they can go with, where Holmes is potentially better suited to be a backup 4 than a backup 5. So it's great that they have Jonas Valanciunas. But either way, like, Holmes can get minutes at both of those positions. He could also play at the 4 alongside Jokic. Like, there's just so many more options here when you look at this rotation overall, this front court rotation specifically. But I think that Holmes is an impressive talent. He is fluid, attacking off the catch. He brings real ass shooting for a big. Like, he is doing it with volume. He is doing it versus contests. He can shoot the basketball for real. He was a very effective post-up mismatch attacker in college. He's a good shot blocker. He's a capable ball mover. I think he's ready to contribute right now. I think he will get minutes for this team, and having multiple options for a backup big who I can see actually playing in the playoffs, like, that's got to be surreal for Nuggets fans. That's got to be like a dream because the options have been so dire there in recent years. And you look at the totality of this team, and there's a little more ball handling, and there's more shooting, and there's just more quality basketball players all around. This is going to be the best Nuggets team ever. I feel pretty strongly about that. The only difference is in 2023, when they won the title, there were no Thunder. The bar for winning a title right now has gotten higher because there is this monstrous team you have to go through in your own conference. But I absolutely love everything the Nuggets have done, and I think we are going to see a phenomenal basketball team in Denver this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, this is what you do in the offseason when you have a guy like Nikola Jokic on your roster. There's no time to wait. You've got the best player on the planet.
Nobody told Calvin Booth that, but Ben 10 figured it out. Ben Wallace.
Had to, man. This is what you do. You got to go and strike while the iron's hot. And when you feel like you've got the best player on the planet, there's no time to waste. It's like, you'd love to see if Milwaukee could have done anything else to have retooled the team around Giannis.
Yeah.
I just say that because Denver looked like they were going to be in dire straits coming into this offseason. It looked like their goose may be cooked, and I think they had maybe the best offseason of any team, like going from their prospects last season where Michael Malone is fired at the end of the season. They usher in a new coach, right? It just looked tumultuous. It looked like a team in turmoil that was spiraling, and the playoffs were encouraging, but the more encouraging aspect is that they overhauled this bench and this team and really, really improved. And you talked about Cam Johnson. The guy's a career 39% three-point shooter from behind the arc. Last season, shot 41% off the catch, 38% on pull-ups, 71% in the restricted area. The guy is a phenomenal cutter. He's really good at moving without the basketball. I just think he has way better instincts and feel than a guy like Michael Porter Jr. When I look at the bench, I love the versatility of having a guy like Holmes and Valanciunas. Like, I'm just pumped. I love watching the Nuggets play, and I don't know, man. Just as like a pure basketball enjoyer, the Nuggets admittedly haven't been, like, they're always a fun watch because of Jokic, right? But, like, they're frustrating at times when the bench is just fully collapsing and melting down when Jokic is off the floor. Like, they have just looked completely disjointed there. And I know we've said it, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but this team just has a different level of talent and flexibility than they have ever had in the Nikola Jokic era. And that's just exciting to me. And I think it's going to prove itself in having the second best record of the Jokic era. I only have them winning 55 games, but 58 would be the record in the Jokic era, correct?
That is correct because they won 57 and 24.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that would be the highest mark. So what are the keys that stand out to you with this team, Logan? When we talk about swing factors, difference between maybe second round exit and a title for this team.
Yeah, I only have one really big swing factor for Denver. Well, I guess two swing factors.
Okay.
Because I'm confident in a lot of what Denver brings me. Obviously, the offensive floor. We know what the offense is going to be. The first swing factor to me has to be the defense and the level that they can defend at. And that, to me, has more to do with an intensity thing, in effort. Maybe not more than anything else, right? Obviously, you're making up for Nikola Jokic and some of his deficiencies, but it's like, I don't think Jokic is a bad defender. I think that narrative kind of gets overblown at this point. No, he's not a plus rim protector, but he's really good in terms of positioning and instincts, and he's got really active hands, and he's a big body to where at least, he can physically match up strength-wise on the block and disrupt these guys a little bit. He's not an elite defender or anything like that, but he's not this catastrophe that some people will characterize Jokic at as a defender. And so what level can they reach as a team defensively? I think Cam's going to be better than MPJ, but Cam's nowhere near as impactful as a rebounder as a guy like MPJ is. So they're going to have to rebound a little bit more as a team. Christian Brown, I thought, was really good on that end last year. And then just how does the bench gel together? You do have another drop big in a guy like Valanciunas. So there's little things, but I think they're going to be better than last year. Last year they were 22nd. I think this could be an average defense, like just middle of the road, 15th. And I think that is good enough to go on a playoff run. The second component, and we said this last year, it's Jamal Murray, in my opinion. Can Jamal Murray be a superstar? Can he give you 25 and 7? Can he give you 24 and 7 efficiently? Like what level does he reach as the second star? We say it every year. But it is. The level that Jamal Murray was at during the NBA Finals run, the championship run, was that of a superstar. Are they going to get that version of Jamal Murray when it comes crunch time? I don't think he needs to be at that level because I do think this offense is going to take a bump with Tim Hardaway Jr., with just having competent bench play, with the influx of Cam Johnson, right? Those things balance each other out a little bit, but you still do need Jamal Murray to be at a borderline star kind of level to win a championship. That's just, like you said, dude, the standard has changed. The standard is different when you have a team like the Thunder standing in their way, but those to me are the two really big keys for Denver this season.
So I definitely agree with both of those being keys. The team defense, I am optimistic about with Denver because, you look at the fall off from 2024 when they were 8th in defensive rating to what they did last year in the regular season when at times it just felt like they totally let go of the rope and they had some catastrophic effort performances. KCP's absence definitely made an impact. Just his proficiency as a screen navigator, being better than Christian Brown at staying attached to a lot of these high-level guards. Like, he was a better, more valuable defensive player to this team. But a lot of the difference from one regular season to the next was just that their effort and their composure kind of fell apart on the defensive end throughout the regular season. And it came to a boiling point where Mike Malone gets fired, Calvin Booth gets fired. Then you saw them turn it around, and you saw that they could defend at a very solid level in the playoffs, and this has actually been a pretty consistent trend for the Nuggets, right? 2023, they were an average regular season defense, and then they got to the playoffs, and it was like, whoa, these dudes are really defending. Jokic's activity picked up a level. Just overall, as a team, they were super engaged, and they are able to execute certain schemes at a pretty solid level, and I thought that we saw them find their strengths in both the Clippers and the Thunder series. I thought that Christian Brown did a nice job on Shai. I think that he does have potential to be a very good point of attack defender. And we saw them go to the zone, which was able to disrupt the Thunder offense in stretches. Now, I think that part of the problem here is that is definitely your best look against OKC. And now they've seen it, and everybody, for the most part, is going to try to throw some zone at them, and so they tend to figure it out, and if they shoot the ball up to their potential and Shai makes decisions that ultimately are different but not that hard to make, it's not actually a good answer. So that's the question. When we look at the Thunder matchup, can they make OKC uncomfortable? I'm not convinced of that, but what I will say is I think the Nuggets are going to be fine defensively. I think they will be good enough on that side of the ball to beat everybody other than OKC, and then they'll just have to elevate and probably get really crafty in that one specific matchup and play their absolute best defense if they want to win it. And then you do talk about Jamal. Like, he is the biggest swing factor for this team, in my opinion, just because I feel like I'm more confident about the defense elevating to a solid level in the playoffs and probably just being more serious throughout the regular season, right? I think Aaron Gordon is important as a fulcrum for this defense. He missed a lot of time last year. But with Jamal, this is a guy who, in the bubble and in the title run, was able to elevate to the level where he was playing like a top 15 kind of player in those playoff runs. And now you look at the totality of his body of work over the last couple of years, and you're like, okay, that guy is something more like the 40th best player in basketball. And he can be super reliant on his difficult shot making. And you wonder, like, can he get super hot as a jump shooter like he did in those two great playoff runs? Again, I think the answer is yes, he can do it, but should you bank on it when he can struggle to create separation? He can struggle to create advantages, particularly against some of these really athletic and physical defenses that are able to pick him up, apply a lot of ball pressure. We saw it against Minnesota in the 2024 playoffs, and we saw it against OKC this year. Not to say Jamal struggled any more relative to his standards than the average star did against OKC, and he had a couple really good games, but he was very inconsistent, and his efficiency was rough. The turnovers were pretty high, and it's a crazy tough matchup when they can just send so many elite perimeter defenders his way, and they can overwhelm him athletically. And he just wasn't able to create enough quality shots to increase his scoring volume against them, which Denver needs. So I thought that Jamal was fine in the playoffs this year, but that's not good enough. Jamal has to elevate. Jamal has to be better than regular season Jamal Murray, who can be up and down and who can take some time to play his way into form. And that's okay in the regular season, but in the playoffs, he's got to take a level up. He's got to play like a top 25 player at the least, be dialed in as a shot maker. And the quickness is something to monitor, because I do think that he's lost a little bit there, the ability to get by people that he had in his earlier years, and that is going to present issues, again, when you can't create advantages against these elite defenses. A couple other things I would look at. Christian Braun's shooting is a pretty big one to me, just because Christian Braun is like the ideal complement fifth starter here in so many ways, because he is the best point of attack defender on the team when it comes to dealing with like those guard matchups, right? Obviously AG is the guy they look to with the bigger wings and the forwards, but Christian Braun is pretty good at that. He's an awesome cutter. He's a weapon in transition and has been part of Denver's identity of really picking up the pace there. He's so effective as a scorer. He's such a good finisher around the rim. And then the guy shot 40% from three in the regular season, but it's a fake 40%. It's low volume. It's pretty much only when wide open, and he's not somebody who you trust. You get to the playoffs, naturally, he gets tested a lot as a shooter. Teams are very willing to roam off of him, to load up on Jokic, and he shoots under 30% from deep on 5 attempts per game. So the good news is now they have a Tim Hardaway Jr. who they can go to in some of those minutes as a 2, who is definitely more reliable and valuable as a 3-point shooter. The bad news is Christian Braun is better at everything else than Tim Hardaway Jr. So to get the best overall production from your 2 guard, you need Christian Braun to be on the floor playing big minutes. But if he's really struggling to shoot, that's when he can hold this offense back a bit. So we'll see how he develops. I do think he got better as a shooter this past year, but it wasn't enough to really translate to the playoffs. So we'll see what happens with him. He's a young player. He's one of the most improved in basketball this past year, but he's got to keep getting better in that one specific area. And then the last key that I'll lay out is just, can Jokic go absolute God mode? Because I think that's kind of required of him to beat OKC. Like, I think Denver has to play their best basketball to beat OKC, and that's on the defensive end of the floor, being able to take their offense out of rhythm a little bit. That is with Jamal Murray being really at his best as a shot maker. And then it's with Jokic not having some of the clunkers that he did have against OKC in their playoff series this year. And OKC is the best defense that we've seen in a couple decades. And the extent to which they were able to, again, load up on him, and the number of different bodies they threw at him, and the level of physicality and activity that they threw at him. Like, it's an exceedingly difficult matchup, and nevertheless, if Jokic plays his best, maybe Denver could have won that series. So playing his best doesn't mean he averages 30, 13, and 10 on 67% true shooting like he does in the regular season. He's not doing that to the Thunder. The Thunder are just too great. But it also doesn't excuse him having 4.5 turnovers a game and under 6 assists, and his true shooting percentage dipping by whatever it did, 8-9 points compared to usual. Like, you give the Thunder the utmost credit for their insane defensive level, and yet they were able to disrupt Jokic a little bit more than you would expect the best player on the planet to be disrupted, even by such a great defense. But if he can resist and maintain something closer to his normal production, I think that that's key. But look, like, the guy has to reach an exceptionally high level. I think it is incredibly difficult to post close to your normal production when you face the Thunder as a star. Jokic was not only not alone in facing a significant drop when he went up against them, it happened to every star except for Pascal Siakam. Shout out to him. But everybody else struggled against OKC relative to their standards. But he's the best player on the planet. And so if there's anybody who can persist, I think he's the guy who you look at. And that would be potentially the thing that could actually help Denver win this series if he just has one of those legacy, oh my God, this is one of the all-time greats kind of series. Overall, I do view Denver as a major threat to OKC with these improvements they've made, with the fact that I do view their offense as the best in the league and Jokic as the best, most unsolvable offensive player in the league. And nevertheless, I know that the Thunder defense can solve them enough to win the series because we've already seen it. And I know that the Thunder are also probably going to be better this year than last year, because a lot of people look at last year and they say, oh, Denver took them to 7. MPJ was terrible. Aaron Gordon got hurt. And then the Nuggets got this much better in the offseason. But the Thunder can also play a lot better than they did. J-Dub and Chet really struggled in that series in a way I wouldn't expect them to again. And there's all these opportunities for internal improvement, more consistent shooting, even more consistent Shai that, again, I've said this a couple times already. I just can't pick anybody to beat the Thunder. But if I were going to pick anybody, it would be these Denver Nuggets. Let's move on, Logan. Who's next in this division for you?
I've got the Timberwolves here in my 3 spot in the Northwest Division. I've got them going 48-34. They went 49-33 last season, so just a little bit of a regression. You know, I think this team is really solid to bank on, Carson. They've got a really good defense built around Rudy Gobert and Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards. They're really physical, strong, athletic, feisty. And then on offense, they're led out by one of my favorite players in all of the NBA, and Anthony Edwards, who took a really massive leap last season as a jump shooter, was really great from behind the arc, nearly 40% on 10 attempts per game. Took a real leap there, and you know, he's already one of the best rim pressures and downhill forces in all of the NBA. They're really solid, and you can bank on them being consistent and really good on both sides of the ball. They were a top 10 team in terms of offensive rating and defensive rating last season. I am a little concerned, though, because we do have a little turnover, and I am a little bit worried about regression. The big loss for them is Nikola-Alexander Walker, who, you know, some people may scoff at. They go, oh, you know, they get Anthony Edwards, Randall, Gobert. Nikola-Alexander Walker, I think, is a starting caliber basketball player and was one of the best bench players in all of basketball last season. The guy was a really great shooter and a really elite perimeter defender, and so you've got to find a way to replace his value. And then the other things I'm looking at are regression. The big guy that you point at is Mike Conley, who took a step back last season. He dropped by 5% in terms of true shooting percentage, 6% in terms of field goal percentage, and 3 points per game. And he shot the highest three-point rate of his career. 66.2% of Mike Conley's shots came from behind the arc. That's the most notable loss in his game, is just downhill force, rim pressure. It's really being able to impose himself on the game, man. He just didn't feel like he could physically exert himself.
That feels like an understatement of it even. This guy was the worst inside the arc scoring starter in basketball last year. In the playoffs, Logan,
it can't be surprising.
0.62 pointers per game and shot 25% on them. He cannot score inside the arc whatsoever. He doesn't even get to his little floaters anymore. Like, just doesn't score inside the arc.
He's old. And, again, people may look at this and go, it's these things on the margins that are going to make the real big difference here for Minnesota. And Mike Conley was such a big release valve for them in terms of that shot making. The three-pointer and the floater, and now that's just a dimension of his offense that's gone. He's still a good decision maker, but he's just limited in terms of the way he can score the basketball. And in the NBA in 2026, that's kind of a death knell. If you can't score the ball, you're not creating advantages. Defenses are just not going to respect you. And so those are the things on the margins that I worry about the Timberwolves. You know, they've got a good bench. They've got a rock-solid formula with their starters. But some people may look at this and go, oh, another year of development from Anthony Edwards, another year of Julius Randle on this roster. We should see this team become a 50-win team. It's these things on the margins with an improving Western Conference around them that make me worried about Minnesota being able to replicate their record total from last season. So that's why I have them one win below their total from last season. And I'll get into the specifics of where, you know, I think they may be able to get value from some of these young guys. But the West is tough, man. Not everybody's going to be able to win as many games as they did last year.
That's interesting. I actually do have the Timberwolves improving in terms of record. I have them winning 52 games, and I have them as my 4 seed. I do feel like they are a team where I see a pretty narrow range of outcomes. I think they are quite a safe bet to win 50-plus games, be very competitive in their first-round playoff series, very possibly win it depending on the matchup. But I think some kind of crazy outlier shit would have to happen for them to be like an actual championship team this year. But the reason I am so confident in their formula getting them to a very good place overall as a team is because they do a lot really well. I mean, they're an elite defensive team. They've got a top-tier defensive anchor in the game in Rudy Gobert with very good perimeter defenders. Alongside him, they're an elite rebounding team. They are an elite strength and physicality team, and that's an area in which we see them really impose themselves in the playoffs, particularly when things get more physical. That tends to benefit Minnesota. And they also have a very good offense. They have 2 big-time advantage creators in Ant and Randle, 2 of those guys who physically can impose themselves. Ant can get by people. He can get downhill all the way to the basket. He can bully certain matchups with his strength. And Randle is a guy who has a whole lot of mismatches for him out there in the league, just with the combination of size, strength, and skill that he has. And then there's a lot of shooting around those guys. I mean, you look up and down this roster, Minnesota was top 5 in three-pointers made, and they were top 5 in three-point percentage last year. Dante DiVincenzo is a guy who can absolutely spray. Conley still shoots it well from deep. Jaden McDaniels can be up and down there. He's okay as a three-point shooter. But with Ant's development as now one of the absolute best pull-up three-point shooters on the planet, this is a team that gives you high volume and efficiency from beyond the arc. They've got a top 10 player leading the charge. And one thing that I love about Minnesota, elite lineup versatility and very good depth. That is maybe the strength of this team overall. When we talk about the ability to mix and match, they can go double big with Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert. If Rudy is really struggling offensively, they can throw Naz Reid at the 5, where he has his limitations, but he is an absolute flamethrower offensively with his ability to put the ball on the floor, drive, shoot from 3 at such a high level. And they can really kill you with some of that 5-out spacing offensively. But then also Rudy obviously is such a great defensive anchor that with him at the 5 and Naz off, they're excellent in those looks. And they've got a lot of different combinations of some of these perimeter players. Nickeil Walker was a valuable part of that equation because he did bring the elite point of attack defense with some offense that could be up and down, but when he was shooting it well, he had some skill as a driver as well and decent passing feel, and he could just be an awesome all-around player for them. But if he's struggling shooting, you can go with DiVincenzo, who's an absolute flamethrower, and also is a really good defensive playmaker, makes something of an impact there. They don't have Na anymore, but they do have a couple young wings here who can step up. And I'm not saying they're going to be as good as Nickeil Walker was, but I feel pretty good overall about Terrence Shannon Jr. and Jalen Clark supplementing a good deal of his value and ultimately still being some of those two-way wings, athletes who you feel you can turn to and they can give you some decent minutes. So there's a lot of good contributors here. There's lineup versatility. They're very good on both sides of the ball, bottom line. And that's why I'm confident in them being a top 4 seed in the West. There are some swing factors here, though, Logan. And you mentioned Mike Conley's deterioration. That really hurt them. Like 2 years ago in their playoff run, Conley was a guy who could be a legitimate secondary ball handler for them, who brought stability with his decision-making, who was still able to be capable as a scorer, and he was valuable in that 2024 playoff run. Last year, he still brings the decision-making. He protects the basketball. He can still fill a solid role defensively with his IQ and good length for his height, but he's utterly incapable as a scorer of the basketball. And so that's a limitation where they need another ball handler. They need somebody else who can create, who can take on more of that responsibility. And the guy who I think Timberwolves fans are looking to long-term to do that, and short-term now too, just because Conley has regressed so much, is Rob Too Shifty Rob Dillingham. Personally, I do not believe that Dillingham is going to be an impactful player for them this season. I really worry about his issues finishing, his overall inside-the-arc scoring. We talk about wanting year 2 guys to look above the pack, and he did some good stuff in Summer League, but he shot 36% from the field. And so he has obviously some positive traits, the ball handling, the jitteriness, the change in pace, the pull-up shooting potential that he has, flashes of playmaking. But I really worry about his slightness in terms of his frame on both sides of the ball. I worry about that with his ability to finish offensively. I mean, just being as small as he is. And defensively, I think he is going to get relentlessly attacked. So that's kind of the biggest spot I'm looking at long-term with the Timberwolves is who's that other guard, specifically a point guard, who can fill the role they need offensively. I don't think that guy is on the roster for this season, and that's why I can't view the Timberwolves as a top-tier contender.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest reason why I don't view Minnesota as a top-tier contender. I think Ant has some areas of his game that he needs to round out, like when we're looking at them as like a tier 1 kind of, big dog contender. But Conley's spot is probably the biggest one. And we're talking about someone like Rob Dillingham. You just have to be exceptional as an offensive player in the archetype that Rob is to justify playing time. He just is a huge defensive liability where he's just going to, like you said, man, every single possession in a playoff series, you feel like he is going to be the guy involved in the action and getting attacked. And that's going to take a hit to your team defense. And then offensively, you just have to be so talented when you're that kind of size in the land of the giants of the NBA to demand playing time. And I was encouraged in stretches that we saw from Rob last season in transition, really pushing the tempo, pushing the pace, making good decisions. But he just wasn't super efficient, and I worry about him too, man. You get caught up in some of these young guards and their athleticism in college, and it's hard, man. Guys in the NBA are just so athletic, so tall, so long. It's hard for these young guards, man, and it is just unfortunately an archetype that it is almost a dime a dozen, it feels like, in the NBA today. And I liked Rob as a prospect. It's just hard for me to envision, even as a Rob optimist, him being super effective for a playoff team in year 2. And I'm not saying it can't happen long-term or it's impossible, but that is one of my big concerns. I do like Clark and Shannon Jr. I actually think that's probably one of the areas where I expect this team to almost not miss a beat. I think those guys are exceptional perimeter defenders. I think they're going to be great. And that's one of the things I like about having young guys that can slide in on the perimeter. They're just going to be relentless in their minutes, man. Like tops that just don't stop spinning, man. You put them in there and boom, you just feel their effect. That's the spot, man. And that is one of the big reasons why I expect this team to kind of be the same team that they were last year, where it's going to balance itself out, where, I don't know, man. I think Rob's going to be good, but I don't think he's going to be like this great starter. And I think he's going to take a hit to the team defense. And I just don't think he's going to be better than a guy like Mike Conley, man. And that's a problem when you take a guy in the top 10 and expect the results to be immediate. I'm skeptical. I've got another big area of concern, but I'll let you hit on Rob real quick before we get into that one.
You said most of it, but I do look at this team and I'm like, by the end of this year, am I going to prefer Rob Dillingham to then 38-year-old Mike Conley? I still just feel more confident in what Conley does bring me, which is not good because Conley has all these major issues at this point.
Before we move on to other stuff, if mid-season, say this team is floundering a little bit around 500, do you think it would be worthwhile to explore, again, this is early, we haven't even started the season yet, but if this persists, if this seems like it's going to be a major issue for this team, would you be willing to maybe compromise one of these young assets to go out there and acquire a point guard? Would it be worthwhile in Minnesota's interest?
It depends on the caliber of the player to me, but if it's a legitimate difference maker they could go out there and get, yeah, I'd be willing to do that. I would. And honestly, like, it would have been nice if they could even have gone out there and got somebody on the margins. I mean, like, I'd feel better about this team if they had a Ty Jerome who they could go with. Like, that would make a difference. I do think there's potential for them to go more with a backcourt of Ant and Dante. Yeah.
I like that. I like that too.
I don't think that they need a true point guard. Dante is somebody who has some playmaking feel. He's solid there. He's a flamethrower from deep. He brings some offensive punch with plus defensive traits. And I just think he's a really good basketball player. And I think that he is a clearly better basketball player than Conley at this point or Dillingham. So that's something I would like to see more of from them. I honestly think that they're better on both sides of the ball with that look than they are with Conley at this point with his major regression. I do also look at Ant as a key for this team, Logan. And look, if Ant plays at the level that he did last year, he'll still be a top 10 player and he'll be the best player on a very good team. But if you are talking about, okay, how does Minnesota take the leap? I look at two areas with him: his consistency as a playmaker and a processor, and his intermediate scoring. His ability against defenses that load up on him, that pack the paint, to both consistently beat them with his passing, and then also to have that nuance as a scorer where he is not fully relying on the pull-up three-point shot and getting all the way to the basket, which defenses can scheme to take away more so than they can the mid-range game. I don't think the floater stuff is going to come together with him this year, if ever. But those are a couple of the areas that I look at as being the keys for him taking that next step, which is what this team would need to take the next step into the kind of top-tier contention that they're hoping for.
That's another one of my big keys: intermediate scoring, playmaking, obviously for Ant. But they do make real differences. You think about a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, what he's able to do in these super packed paints, these congested lanes. Like, that's the difference. It's the nuance, right? Because I think Ant's got all the skill and ability in the world to make that happen. It's about putting it together. I have one more, and so I think that's a big concern, like you said, if we're talking about big picture championship contender, which isn't out of the realm of possibility. One of the things that makes me pause here and say maybe they could win more games is the fact that Julius Randle took so long to get integrated with this team, and then they really figured it out after Julius started playing selflessly. He really felt like this became a team midway through the year. So that does make me think, if Randall's just better from start to finish, if this team could win more games. Because Julius Randle was really good. And in the playoffs, super encouraging run. Let me ask you this. Last thing on the Wolves. The last area that I wondered if this was a swing factor, just because of the age, and you can tell me if you think I'm blowing this out of proportion. Do you think there's any chance we see Rudy Gobert take a bit of a step back this season with him just another year older? That's been one of my concerns with this kind of contract, paying Gobert as he gets older. This age is typically about the time we see these kind of defensive anchors take a bit of a step back because of athletic regression. Is that any concern to you?
It's possible, but I just wouldn't be significantly concerned about it looking the level that he defended at this past year, which I thought was still extraordinarily high. And in fact, in the playoffs, I thought that he showed a level of schematic versatility with his ability to switch onto the Lakers' big three consistently and hold those guys to, like, I believe it was 30% shooting combined when they went at him. while he's obviously still one of the absolute best rim protectors on the planet and a great defensive anchor on the glass. Like, he's 33. He's still played like a top 5 defender this past year. I wouldn't expect him to take a drop immediately. So no, I'm not too worried about that. So overall with the Timberwolves, I feel like they're very good. But again, there's really no upside I see for this team winning the title, barring a crazy leap from Ant, a crazy leap from Rob Dillingham, which I don't see happening. Or I guess maybe Julius Randle could have like the run of his life. But the thing is, Julius Randle actually was having the run of his life for a couple rounds, and then he ran into the defense against which he cannot mismatch attack. He cannot comfortably dribble the basketball, and he just fully melted down against OKC, which you give the guy something of a pass for, right? Because he played so well in the first 2 rounds and because everybody struggles so much against OKC. But it doesn't change the reality that if Minnesota wants to win the title, we presume they have to go through OKC. And I just think that is an extremely difficult matchup for Julius Randle, in which I do expect him to consistently struggle. So I just think they're outclassed there. I think Denver has such a ridiculously high offensive level that I have so much faith in. Minnesota can't be in the same tier as either of those two teams, but they did play very well down the stretch last year. I thought they absolutely found their rhythm with Julius Randle. I thought they found something with a lot of the Nas at the 5 units. They were 32-18 after January 1st. They had a slower start to the year, and they made the Western Conference Finals. Even though Steph got hurt, obviously, maybe that series would have been different. They beat the Lakers. They were playing at a high level down the home stretch. So I do feel like they're one of the most reliable teams to bet on in the West going into this year. Now, Logan, we're going to see a bit of a drop-off. Who's next for you in this division?
I've got the Portland Trailblazers here in this next spot. And there's a little bit of a drop-off, but I'm encouraged. I'm really excited for this season for Portland. It seemed like they made some really big moves in this offseason to legitimize themselves as, competitors. I wouldn't say contenders, but competitors. This team is going to try to make a playoff push. They want to be competitive, and there's a lot to be encouraged by. They finished the season 23-18. It was a really sad start. It looked like Portland was going to be among the bottom dwellers, the worst teams in the league. And they didn't. They finished really strong, and it was on the back of the defensive identity that they established for themselves. I think the defense is going to be even better this season. You have got a really awesome defensive wing tandem in Toumani Camara and Denny Avdia, one of the top in the league, I'd say. And when you look at the front court as a whole, I'm super excited. I think Donovan Clingan is going to have a breakout season this year. Mm-hmm. He was my rookie of the year last year, and I know a lot of people took issue with that because me taking Clingan wasn't really in the traditional spirit of the award. There were guys that played a lot more minutes than him, but I felt on a permanent basis that he was the most effective rookie in all of basketball with the things that he does that you can't change. This guy is an elite rebounder of the basketball, defensively and offensively. He is a mammoth of a man and can box out anybody. Defensively, he is one hell of a rim protector. And I think you're going to see that this year where, he's playing like 20 minutes a night last season. I think this guy's going to get 28 to hopefully 30 minutes a night and really be able to, flex on him, really imprint the game. I'm really high on Clingan. And Clingan's one of those guys that I don't think his total impact is going to be reflected in just the raw box score numbers. Like, I think he's going to give you, 12 and 12 maybe? He's going to give you a double-digit stat line, but he's going to rebound the hell out of the ball, and he's going to protect the rim. And then the other guy that I'm really excited that they're going to add to this defense is Drew Holiday. And Holiday may be old. He may not be super impactful offensively anymore, but you can't take away his mind and how he thinks the game and his positioning and all the little things that he's going to add for this team defensively. And that's another little area that I'm excited about this team is the veteran leadership here. And sometimes I think that can get overstated, but for a young roster, I do like it. Having Drew Holiday, having Damian Lillard, having Jeremy Grant in the room with these young guys hopefully brings a little bit of a balance to this roster. I've got them winning 40 games this year. I think they improved their record by 4 games. And I think I wanted to come in here and say, I think they're going to make a playoff run. I think they're going to make a playoff push. I think they're going to be among the 10 best teams in the West. And yes, that's a lukewarm take, but there are 5 teams that I concretely don't like more than Portland. Phoenix, Sacramento, Memphis, New Orleans, and Utah, I all look at below this Portland roster. So I'm excited, man. I think Portland's going to be really solid defensively all year. I think the big thing for them is just how good they can be offensively, but I think they made positive steps forward in this offseason to hopefully get themselves closer to actually making the playoffs this year. So I'm pumped. I'm excited for Portland, man.
You have them concretely above Memphis. That's
I
solid
think,
for you. Wow.
I think Memphis is going to take a little bit of a step back with the Bane loss, and then I just worry about them staying healthy. 2 and then 3. Some of just the fit stuff with Ja, with Triple J, with Edie. I don't know. I'm worried about the fit there. So, yeah, I have Portland above Memphis as well.
That's interesting. I don't have them that far apart. I just couldn't get there with Portland yet because I do still think if Ja is reasonably healthy, like there's just more talent on that Memphis team still. When you talk about reaching a two-way ceiling, like being pretty good on both sides of the ball, I just have more confidence there. I do think KCP could have something of a bounce-back season for them. I loved the Cedric Coward pick. I still think the depth there is solid. Triple J was an all-NBA level player this regular season. Portland, I really, really worry about the offense. That's why ultimately I couldn't quite put them in the play-in, but I do have them as my 11 seed, and I have them winning 39 games. The reason that I think they're going to be so solid, though, even with all my concerns about the offense, is I agree. This is going to be one of the best defenses in basketball. Like, you're telling me this starting 5 is going to feature Drew Holiday, Toumani Camara, Denny Avdia, and Donovan Clingan. You probably got 3 of the 25 best defenders on the planet there, Logan. And Denny's a clear plus too, but like Toumani Camara is obviously stamped. I would still say that Drew delivers that level of value. And Donovan Clingan on a per minute basis, when you are just talking about elite drop defense, elite rim deterrence, rim protection, and defensive rebounding, this dude is like one of the best already. He held opposing players 13% below their average field goal percentage at the rim. That's one of the best numbers in the league. He averaged 15 rebounds per 36 minutes. So when you are just talking about a straight up defensive anchor, right, in the Walker Kessler, Ivica Zubats kind of mold, these dudes who don't have versatility but are great at anchoring the paint, which is the key thing for a great defensive big, right? The most valuable fundamental thing. He's fantastic at that. So I am also so excited to see more of him. I think there's a lot that he brings to the table physically. I mean, just a massive human being who's got some underrated passing feel. I'd like to see him featured a little more offensively. I mean, he's not super skilled there, but at UConn, we saw him used more running handoffs and stuff. He was very efficient attacking mismatches out of the post, but his value is going to be defensive first and foremost. I think it's going to be great value, though. And then Drew is still an awesome point of attack defender with a lot of matchup versatility. I mean, his ability to guard up remains so impressive. His ability to guard the post, right, take on bigger wings and just physically hold his ground. He's so strong. His defensive IQ is so high. He's fantastic. And Toumani Camara, absolutely top tier in terms of matchup versatility, incredible motor, really good off-ball defender, one of the premier charge takers in basketball, brings you some secondary rim protection value, jumps passing lanes. Like, he does it all, man. He is a stud defensively. So if you look at, like, the minutes with these key guys on the floor last year, not even including Drew, who is going to be a key piece of this defense, when Denny, Camara, and Clingan played together, Portland had a 106.9 defensive rating last year. And by the way, better than a +7 net rating, but that's the level of a top 3 defense. And in fact, they were just awesome on defense down the stretch last year. Overall, Portland went 25-25 over their last 50 games, and they were 6th in defensive rating in that span. That's more than half the year. Now I think they'll be even better. So much size here, so much length, so much athleticism, lots of high IQ defensive players. They're one of those teams where it's like, if you look at least the guys who are playing big minutes, there's no weak point. There's nobody to attack. I don't think it is at all out of the question that this group is a top 5 defense. And I've talked about the core guys, dude. There's even a couple of like sleeper potential monster defenders on this roster. Matisse Thybulle, who was injured for a lot of last year, but he's also sneakily shot 37% from 3 for Portland on 3.6 attempts per game. That's over 2+ years. He's been in and out of the lineup. He's had injury stuff, but him shooting the ball at a solid clip makes him a impact player for you, because the reality is often in his earlier years, his offense was even worse than his defense was great. But that changes if he shoots 37% from 3 on solid volume. And like, Robert Williams is still on this team, man. Time Lord is hanging around. Now, can he be healthy at all? We have no idea. There's also kind of trade rumors still swirling with him. I don't know how much he factors into this season for them, but the totality of their defensive talent here is pretty nuts. And although those last two, Thybulle and Time Lord, are far from locks to play legit minutes for this team, they are also both guys who have been all defense caliber players in pretty recent memory. So I'm all in on the defense. It's the offense that concerns me, Logan. What do you think the outlook is on that side of the ball?
It's tough when you're banking on 2 young guys who are inefficient to lead out your offense, who aren't really high-level advantage creators. It's tough because I was very high on Scoot and Shaedon as prospects in terms of their potential, and there are still encouraging things that I take away from both of these guys, but I don't look at either of them now as superstars. I look at them as they could be starting caliber guards in this league. And it's just that reframing. And they're still going through these growing pains of figuring it out. That's the thing that, like, I could see them both being really good starters 5 years from now, but just like where they're at right now in their development, I don't think they're ready to take on this kind of load. And so it's just kind of clunky. Like, this could be a bottom, it's going to be a bottom 10 offense, I think, again. This season. The defense is going to carry them through, and that's what you can bank on in the regular season. With Shaedon, I really like Shaedon as a finisher. He was 71% inside the restricted area last season, and he was a 38% pull-up jump shooter. Both of those numbers, specifically the finishing, really impressive. Everything outside of that, though, you're worried, especially the perimeter shot, and that's really going to determine what Shaedon can be. Shaedon was a 31% shooter on above-the-break threes and on catch-and-shoot attempts last season. That's not going to cut it as a perimeter player. So you look at him and you go, some of it's really encouraging, some of it really isn't. I think there's a lot encouraging to take away from Scoot's second season in terms of improvement. He improved 5% in terms of true shooting percentage, 3% in terms of three-point percentage, 9% at the rim. But you look at where he was coming from as a rookie, and it's like, he's improved in all those areas, but he's improving to like a below average number now from
he's
like
improving from F numbers.
Exactly. So it's improvement and it's steady, but it's not even like average levels. And I really worry about Scoot in terms of advantage creation. That to me is one of the most important things you can do as a ball handler and as a primary initiator. And that's probably been the area where I've most been disappointed with Scoot in his first 2 years. And that's why I reframe it. I think Scoot could be a solid starter, but I don't see the superstar potential, because you look at the stuff that you were encouraged by as a prospect, the athleticism, the explosiveness, it's just not there. He just doesn't have these A1 athletic traits and advantage creation that you were hoping for as a primary creator. And so I think the shooting is going to be bad overall. I think it's going to be a clunky offensive fit. And I think you're going to go through a lot of these growing pains of having young players as your leaders offensively. And I just don't think that the young players that you're banking on getting better are just there yet. 5 years from now, maybe they could have a really good offense. That's a long time. You know, like Scoot and Shaedon really figuring it out. Young Hansen figuring it out a long time from now. They draft him in the offseason. There's a lot of buzz from him, but I think he's a long-term project piece. That's just kind of how I feel about this offense in totality. So I think both sides of the ball are kind of going to balance itself out. You got a top-tier defense and a bottom-tier offense, and I think they're going to be around 500 this next season. So it's steady improvement, but you're still waiting for this team to break through, and I just don't think the personnel is there for this team to really figure it out offensively enough for me to believe in them.
I agree. This was the number 22 offense last year, and they lost arguably their best offensive player in Ant Simons and another good offensive player in DeAndre Ayton, right? We can criticize him for underachieving, only wanting his second contract, all of the defensive shortcomings. But when it just comes to offensive skill, production efficiency, he gives you a lot more than Donovan Clingan does. And so you are losing something there as well. And you said it, man. They just don't have a proven advantage creating playmaking guard at the moment. I honestly view Shaedon and Scoot in pretty different lights at this point. I don't think Scoot's going to start for this team. I think they're just going to ask him to be their bench ball handler, bench point guard, and I think he can be pretty good in that role. That's still very disappointing coming from how we viewed Scoot as a prospect, how everybody viewed Scoot as a prospect. Shaedon, there's more there right now, and there's also more expectation. He does have the scoring punch, but the three-point shot needs to be more consistent. The playmaking just needs work. I mean, he can make the basic reads, but that's really it. And it's surprising to me that he was below average in terms of overall jump shooting efficiency this past year. Just considering what I thought of him as a prospect, the level that he shot the ball at from deep as a rookie, like him coming down to 31% from deep, that's disappointing. His short range paint touch also just is not super developed. But then he's an awesome rim finisher, as you said. He shoots 46% from mid-range with legitimate volume. He's got a nice game there. He's overall an above-average efficiency pick and roll and isolation scorer and creator. Like, there's offensive juice there, but I don't foresee a big offensive leap from him this year. And for him to be a top 2 option on like a solid to good offense, he would have to become more consistent, like markedly so as a jump shooter, as a playmaker, I think. And I'm just not expecting that. Drew Holiday is the guy you look at who probably will be the starting point guard this year. He is just really diminished offensively. I mean, he has been sapped of so much juice as a creator. We saw it with Boston all of last year. And it's not just like, oh, well, they have so much more offensive skill. They don't need him to do much. This is a guy who was giving you 11 points per game in the regular season, who was giving you 9 points per game in the postseason, who has just really taken a step back in terms of his ability to create offense for a team. So that's the reality there. And I think you have to look at Denny here, who I do think is very good, but he's not a true number 1 primary ball handler for an offense. And so much falls on him here because of the limitations of everybody else around him, because there's nobody else who I view as having the combination of ball handling, advantage creation, playmaking to like even be considered as a number 1 option. Denny is the only guy who can approximate that, but still I don't view him as that. He had his stretch post All-Star break where he averaged 24, 10, and 5 on 64% true shooting. He was balling the fuck out, and the Trailblazers were winning at a solid clip. But it is post All-Star break hoops. It is March and April hoops. And like, we have to understand every year we do see one guy, if not multiple guys, who produce above their means in that stretch. Do I think Denny doing it is more legitimate than Jalen Green in 2024 or Josh Giddey this past year? Absolutely. I think Denny is way better as a basketball player than those guys. Way, way better. But I'm much more comfortable looking at his overall production from last year, 17, 7, and 4 on 61% true shooting, and saying that's who Denny is, than looking at the best stretch of his career, which came playing games that really didn't mean much. I'm not going to overreact to that. So I like Denny. I think this is a big burden on him. And I just think like the overall offensive situation is tough, man. Shooting is a big question here. There's a lot of solid shooters here, but there's really no like dynamic, super reliable, high volume guys, right? Toumani Camara, he can shoot a solid clip. Drew Holiday can shoot a solid clip. Denny can shoot a solid clip, but none of these guys are those consistent, high-level, volume three-point shooters. Portland was 19th in threes made and 26th in three-point percentage last year. That was with Ant Simons, who flawed as a basketball player, but he was one of those guys, high-volume, flamethrower, pull-up shooter. So just with quite limited shooting here, quite limited creation here. I do think we're looking at a bottom 10 offense, as you said. So if that's going to improve, it's probably going to swing on the development of some of these young guys. Scoot did improve as a shooter, as a finisher this past year, but he still struggled overall with his efficiency as a self-creator. And ultimately, I do like him as a bench point guard. I think that's where he's good enough as an athlete. I think the jump shooting is solid enough, the playmaking feel, but it's like you said, man, he's just not the athlete that I thought he was, and that was so central to him being the kind of guy you looked at as a potential future star, high-level starter. I'm not seeing that right now. So this is where I'm comfortable with the Blazers. Young Hansen, I mean, he's an interesting young guy here for sure. I don't know that he'll play much this year at all. He's fun, but
I think he's going to be in the G League a lot this year.
Yeah, and I think that would make a lot of sense. Summer League was fun. Obviously, it's just a rare combination of playmaking at that size, creativity there, but ultimately I think there's a lot in terms of his overall defensive level, IQ, major questions about versatility on that side of the ball, offensively, playing through more physicality against NBA athletes. Young is fun, I'm rooting for him, but I don't think that he's going to be a significant part of the Blazers season this year. Is there anything else that stands out to you here with this Blazers team, Logan?
No, I think they're pretty straightforward. I mean, it's really going to be up to the development of those two guys, and I'm not super encouraged there's going to be a massive kind of leap for these guys mid-year, and I think that would be the swing thing that would stamp this team as a playoff team, and I just don't see it.
Yeah, it is interesting because you're okay, theoretically there's multiple guys who maybe could take that leap. If it is Shaden, if it is Scoot, if it is maybe Denny improving even more from the level he already improved to this past year, but it doesn't feel likely to me. Denny's definitely the best player of that bunch, but also I don't see a big leap coming from him. Last thing I would highlight here is that I do think that depth and health could be a pretty big swing factor for this team. There's this weird situation with Jeremy Grant right now where, first of all, he just had a really bad year this past year. I think that he'll have a bounce-back season to some extent, but he's sitting here on a big contract. The guy's 31 years old. I think both parties probably want him to be elsewhere. He just doesn't really align with this team, and yet I don't think there's a ton of a market to pay Jeremy Grant $30-something million for the next 2 years, 3 years if he opts into his player option, which I think he would. So that's going to be kind of weird for the vibes, and his effectiveness and his utilization with this team kind of remains to be seen. And then Tybal and Robert Williams, I think, could be quality bench players for this team. I don't know how much they're going to be available to play, though. And to have playoff hopes, I think Portland needs quality minutes from all those guys who I just mentioned, because it's a big difference between having those guys, who I think would make for a pretty good bench unit, versus having to lean more on Chris Murray, who I've been super disappointed by, Doo-Wop Reith. There's a big difference there. That would be bad, and that would basically make them a clear non-playoff team to me. So ultimately, I am excited about the Blazers. I think they are going to be not just scrappy. I think they're going to be an awesome defense, which makes them a very serious team. I just have too many concerns about the offense. To some extent, the depth, with some of the question marks lingering over a couple of those potential veterans on their bench, to pick them to the playoffs. But I can also see them doing it. I mean, if that offense can be capable, then that defense should be enough to get them there. I just think it's really going to be a struggle offensively, but I do love that defense. There's one team left, Logan, and it's going to be a struggle for them all around. The Utah Jazz won 17 games this past year, and they were rewarded not with Cooper Flagg, but the 5th pick in the draft. What are you expecting from them this year as realistically the tankathon continues?
Mediocrity, marginal improvement. I don't know what the hell to make of the Jazz. I've got them winning 20 games just out of a sign of respect. I hope you aren't worse than last year. Just I'll give you a boost to 20 games. The Jazz are in such a weird spot, man, because they've got a lot of guys that I really do like is just individual talents, but they're so young and it feels like they're still so far away. I don't know. They're at a crossroads, man. I like a lot of their front court pieces, but I wonder if they can hold on to all of them long term. I like some of their backcourt pieces, and I wonder if they can hold all of them on long term. Like, do they deal Markkanen? That's still a question that I have, man. Like, what is his long-term outlook here? This team is really young and feels really far away, so the logical conclusion feels like they should move off of him this year before he's a free agent and trade him to a contender. He's still on a really good value contract. That's something to watch. Obviously.
Well, no, he's not anymore. He's on a big contract now.
Oh, he re-signed an extension with Utah.
Yeah, he's got the $46 million a year now. And that goes all the way up to $53 million in 2029.
That kind of brings a different caveat where you look at it and go, it would have been nice if the Jazz had moved off of him a year ago when his value was a lot higher after he was coming off of a career year. He was a bit down last season. So, I don't know. If I was Markkanen, I feel like I'd be frustrated with this team's outlook. But that being said, there are some guys I like here. Filipowski was really, really good. I'm encouraged by him, man. That guy just has talent out the ass, great touch, some playmaking feel, post chops. I've been really impressed with him. Walker Kessler, I like a lot. Taylor Hendricks is coming back after a year injured. I know you've been a big fan of him. Mm-hmm. I still really like a guy like Isaiah Collier. Wasn't a super efficient year from him last year, but I liked what you got out of him playmaking. So there's a lot of young players here, man. You feel like there could be a lot of internal development for this team. It's just who is going to take that leap? Who are they going to choose to bank on and build around as the future contenders, and how much of a leap do we see from all this young talent in 1 year? Me personally, I'd like to see them move off of Markkanen and move him to a contender so we can see this guy play meaningful basketball. But it remains to be seen, man. Do you have are there any young guys that you're banking on getting better? Are there any big moves that you see here from Utah? Obviously, there's not really a playoff outlook for this team this year.
Well, I kind of want to run through all the young guys because it feels like that's pretty much all there is to talk about here. But I'll give my prediction for Utah first. I have them winning 17 games. I have them last in the West. They won 17 games last year, and then they gave up two of their four best players in Sexton and John Collins. So there's no question they're going to be awful. The question is just how awful are they going to be? Utah is in an extraordinarily weird spot where it feels like they've sucked for a long time, and yet you look at this roster and you're like, where are the fruits of your suffering, of your tanking? Like, where are the premier talents? Where are the building blocks? Where are the guys you know are really good? Because we can go through a lot of these guys and I'm like, oh yeah, they're solid. I think that guy's solid. But they haven't had a top 4 pick, right? Ace is the highest draft pick they've had, and he's a whole different bag of worms that we can get into later. But it's just very strange that they have like 2 known commodities on the whole team in Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, both of whom have been these known commodities for 3 years now. And they just kind of went from this spot where it's like, okay, we kind of suck. We suck more. Now we totally suck. They traded Sexton in a negative move, in my opinion. It's just baffling. Like, I don't know, man. Normally I give Danny Ainge the ultimate credit because he's done a lot of great work, but
is he just trying to tank for this year, man? Like,
well, I think clearly they wanted a tank for Flag, and we'd probably feel entirely different about this whole situation if the ping pong balls had just bounced differently and they got Cooper Flag. But not trading Markkanen at the peak of his value, holding on, now giving him this massive extension, you're not going to get the same return for him that you would have, and he never aligned with your timeline. I just think they're in a really bad spot overall. So I am expecting a bounce back year from Markkanen. He had a down year. I am ultimately a Lowry believer. I just think he had back-to-back awesome seasons in 23 and 24. And I think he's closer to that than what he was this past year. He is just so unique in his ability to impact the game off ball with his shooting value, be hyper efficient as a legitimate 7-footer who can shoot 40% from 3 on massive volume. He can fit in somewhere as a second option and make that offense so much better in kind of a relatively low usage role. But again, he's going to be harder to move now. He's got to have a bounce back year for them to be able to trade him for a great return. The Jazz have to be willing to trade him. Like, we'll see what unfolds with that saga. But either way, I don't know how much him getting better actually matters for this team this year, because they're going to be terrible either way. They were 24th in offensive rating last year. They were 30th in defensive rating. I just don't see why they'd get better on either side of the ball when now they're even more reliant on some of these unknown young players. So it's really all about the young guys. Let's run through them pretty quick, Logan, and give our takes on kind of all of them. Ace Bailey is obviously the guy who Jazz fans have to be looking at. He did not want to be in Utah. He really didn't seem to want to be anywhere save one spot, but here he is. So what are you expecting from him this season?
A lot of shots. He's going to get a lot of attempts this year. Ace Bailey's super talented. My thing with Ace was always about if he was going to decide to play a role and play a winning brand of basketball. I think the guy is an incredible vertical athlete. I think could be a real weapon in the pick and pop and pick and roll game. Like, I think he would just be a problem there where you can just throw the ball up near the rim. He can slam it down. Really elite shooter. It's just like the decision making and what he thinks he is, his perception of himself versus what he actually is as a player. I don't think he has a particularly good handle. I don't think I don't think he's got a burst. I don't think he can really create separation or create himself space for a shot. I think he's got very poor basketball IQ and is just not a really willing passer or team player. So I think he has some of these black hole tendencies that we talk about. So just as a prospect, like, you see all the talent. Of course you do. You see all the ability. But I just think it's how he weaponizes that ability. Is he going to play a style of basketball that maximizes his, A1 traits and minimizes some of his shortcomings? Or is he going to try to be Luka Doncic? Is he going to go prime Jerry Stackhouse on us and just chuck up a bunch of looks? There's a range of outcomes for Ace. I think he's an exceptionally talented basketball player and could be a stud if he commits to what he's really good at. But I don't like his basketball IQ. I don't like his brain. I don't like a lot of his decision making. And so there are a lot of red flags that I have about Ace. And in my opinion, I don't know if you feel the same way, Carson. I feel like Utah was one of the handful of spots that I really didn't want him going to because I felt like Ace was a guy that I wanted to go to a team that had direction and focus and, where they were, not that they were going to put him in a role, but they were going to, funnel him into a winning impact kind of style of play. Maybe one where he could play alongside a lead offensive player and find his role as a number 2 or number 3. And I feel like Utah just isn't one of those spots. So I've got complicated feelings about Ace Bailey. Ultimately, I feel like I'm probably more concerned than I am optimistic about him as a player.
It's going to be a wild rookie year from Ace, is my prediction, and I think it's going to be a pretty rough one. He's such a divisive, polarizing talent. I had him 6th on my big board, and he went 5th. So it's not like it was a big reach, but the thing with Ace is there is significant upside and there is significant downside. To me, the upside never looked with him like it did maybe to other people or to himself, where he draws the KD comparisons, which are absolutely nuts. But my thought was, okay, if he makes the most of his athleticism, his size, his length defensively, he can be a positive contributor there. And if he uses his pure shot-making skill at his size offensively and is willing to embrace cutting and moving without the ball, he can be somebody who's like kind of a lean contributor there. And basically the comp I made several times was, could he be MPJ with plus defense? That's a really good basketball player. But he has major limitations when it comes to casting him into a star role. His handle is bad. He's got a major negative assist to turnover ratio. His shot selection is brutal. And he also has major limitations in terms of being able to get to efficient spots on the floor. He doesn't get to the rim. He loves the tough twos. And you're not going to live off of that as an NBA player. When he really struggles with ball pressure, he struggles with physicality, he struggles to get past people. Like, that's a major concern with him. because he thinks that he is one of those stars. And mentality has basically been the swing trait for me with Ace Bailey, right? Does he lean into the idea that, oh, I am going to be one of these superstar wings, primary ball handlers, or does he lean into embracing a role and doing what he does best? Every indication up to this point has been that he sees himself as the star. He's turning down workouts. He's got very particular preferred destinations. He has come right out and said, like, I'm one of those star guys. So it is unfortunate that he is kind of the guy now in Utah. When you look at the long-term future, I think it would have been better for him to go to a place where there were other like really high profile young guys who were priorities, or there's just more of an established infrastructure, somebody who is a guard, who's a legitimate high-end creator who he could play off of. Like, I think that sort of structure would be good for him, and then it's up to him to embrace it or not. Utah just doesn't have that. They are severely lacking in talent. And although I actually like Will Hardy as an offensive mind, I like a lot of the stuff that he runs. And when you talk about like trying to make the most out of a player off ball, coming off of screens, Will Hardy in theory runs one of the best offenses in basketball for a player like that. I think he's a huge reason that Larry Markkinen had the breakout that he did, because Hardy's system maximized the value of a player like that. But I just don't know that Ace is going to embrace that when he seems to like be openly displeased with being in Utah. And if he is going to try to do the shit that he did at Rutgers, if he's going to try to live off of that same shot diet and force those same shots, this dude is going to shoot 30-something% from the field, and he's going to be negative in terms of playmaking, major negative there, and we'll see if he engages defensively. But there's a range of outcomes here with Ace. I think his rookie year is probably going to be pretty chaotic and rough in some ways.
Roller coaster.
Probably going to be a roller coaster that mostly goes off the tracks and into the ocean and everybody dies. How about Walter Clayton, Logan? I know you love him. What are you expecting his rookie year?
Big-time Walter Clayton guy. Oh, yeah. I think Walter Clayton's going to be good his rookie year. I don't see superstar kind of upside with Clayton. I think he's an elite shooter from behind the arc. Like, he is a special kind of shooter. The guy's confident. He's always ready to go. He can shoot from distance, can shoot off movement, pull up threes. I really like his decision-making, too. He's just not like a super high-end athlete. Like, when I look at Walter Clayton, I look at like a starting caliber guard. I think there are some limitations. He's not a high-level advantage creator, downhill attacker, kind of athletic specimen, and he's not a really super high-impact defender. I think he's probably going to get attacked a lot on that end. He's 6'2", I think, with an even wingspan, about a $195. Like, he's probably going to be a little bit of a liability on that end, but I think he can be a good six-man or starting caliber guard just because of his shooting ability and his decision-making and his poise out of pick and roll. I think he's a really good operator out of there, and he's a veteran guy. He's also really good finishing at the rim last season. That was a big improvement for him. He was really poor as an at-rim finisher his first years in college. I think that's something to just monitor with him in his rookie season, what level he's at there, but he's solid. He is a solid rookie. I'll give him that. I think it's going to be a good rookie year from him. I think he's going to be a stabilizing young player on this roster. And I love Walter Clayton, man. I
know you do.
I wanted him to go to. I do. I've got all the Walter Clayton plushies. I wanted him to go to a team that was a little bit more ready to contend. So, in full transparency, I'm a little disappointed that he went to a space like Utah. But I think he's going to be good for this team, and I think he's going to be one of the more stable young players on this roster.
Yeah, and he's 22, so there is obviously an expectation that this is a guy who's pro-ready. I mean, he was just the best player on the team that won the national title. Not as much of an upside play, but I do think that he's going to be pretty good for Utah as a rookie. I mean, great pull-up shooter, really good off the catch, good handle, good strength, nice craft out of pick and roll, plays at a good pace. Just a nice all-around offensive player, right? Doesn't have the star upside because of athletic limitations, not having that like upper echelon decision-making, playmaking. but he's a high offensive floor play. And we'll see how much he struggles defensively. I think that's going to be an issue for him. But regardless, I like Utah adding a pretty consistent, reliable offensive player in their backcourt. That's a good thing for them. How about Cody Williams, who was their top pick last year?
I have
nothing.
What
are you expecting from him?
I have nothing.
Overall and rough rookie season.
I got nothing to say about Cody Williams, man. I thought Cody Williams was a top 3 player in that draft. I thought he was going to be really malleable and versatile, and I looked at him as one of like the high floor guys in a disappointing class, and he was nothing but. He was an atrocious rookie year, one of the worst I can remember from a player. I hope he stays in the league. Wow. That's what I got to say about Cody Williams.
Wow, dude. I'm more optimistic, by the way. We probably shouldn't get too into the nitty-gritty here with talking about every young Jazz player because I don't know that people care that much. I am expecting legit improvement from Cody Williams, though. I thought he looked good in Summer League. 8 Summer League games. He gave you 17, 4, and 2 on 45, 33, 80 splits. I thought he looked better all around. The shot looked better to me. I mean, the results were better, but also just much more confident. I mean, it was a brutal shooting season from him his rookie year. It was mostly off the catch, but he was willing to take those shots quickly with some range, with some pretty decent accuracy. And the more appealing part with Cody offensively has always been his driving ability, changing pace, varying stride lengths, pretty good footwork, good length as a finisher, good size, 6'7". I thought that he showed that off as well. So last year was brutal, no question, particularly the shooting and the touch stuff was just terrible. And he really struggled to create anything good for himself. The handle was a big limiter for him. I still need to see the handle get better, but he looked more confident in Summer League. Seeing him take on more volume, be more productive. I still like some of the traits and the versatility.
I do. I do too. A lot of the stuff I liked about Cody was connective anyway.
Exactly.
It wasn't really about him as a lead kind of guy. I liked him as a screen setter, as a cutter, as a roll man, as a finisher. Like, it was all the little defensively, right? Like, it was all the connective wing stuff. Pretty damning stat. It's so funny to me about this rookie season. Cody Williams, minimum 5 field goal attempts per game, minimum 50 games played, had the second worst true shooting percentage of any rookie since 2000, 41.9%, 4.6 points per game. Carson, in that wicked brain of yours, is there any guess at who could be number 1 on this list?
Jordan Poole is the first guy who comes to mind.
That's such an awesome guess.
He was so terrible. The worst true shooting percentage by a rookie since 2000. I'm trying to think about who just had an absolute, Scoot's not too far off that. I think his was like 47%. Who is it?
This is a crazy poll. JH are the initials. I'll give you that. Do you anything? Jordan Poole's not a bad guess. He is 18th on this list, 45.4%.
JH. I don't know why. My brain must be so malfunctioning. I've thought of James Young and Romeo Langford off of that, neither of whom have the initials JH. Who is it?
This is Junior Harrington, 40.5%, 03 with the Denver Nuggets. How about that, man? But yeah, I really like Cody as a prospect. I was super disappointed. I hope he can find his way, and I hope we see some of those connective traits flash this season.
Whoa. I just want to look up these numbers. Okay, I guess James Young didn't meet the 5 attempts per game, but he did have a true shooting percentage of 45 as a rookie, and Romeo Langford as a rookie had a true shooting percentage of 43. Great guesses, Logan, in the scheme of things. Neither of them had the initials JH, but I'm not going to lie. As much as I love ball, I was not getting Junior Harrington. I think that Cody's going to have a solid second season. I mean, you said it. It's the connective stuff, right? It's the feel as a passer. It's the cutting ability. It's the solid defensive versatility. Obviously, my opinion of him has dropped since I did like him as the 10th pick, but I do not think he is going to be one of the worst players in the league like he was as a rookie. Taylor Hendricks, Logan, going into year 3, but basically year 2 because he got hurt so fast this year. What are your quick expectations or thoughts?
I liked Hendricks. I hope we see him healthy this year. Big body forward, can bang down low, really versatile in terms of defense, can rebound. And was a good shooter last time we saw him. And so that's what's so weird, man, is I don't know, Carson. We've been talking about this for 2 years with the Jazz, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it does feel like at a point and I guess they did this a little bit last season, but they're just going to have to like pick and choose who their guys are going to be. You know what I mean? With Williams, with Markkanen, with Hendricks, with Kessler. Like, there's just only so many minutes guys can play, and they just have such a loaded front court with Filipowski too, you know? So this is all just to say there's only so many mouths you can feed and so many young players that you can choose between. But I like Hendricks. I think he's a versatile kind of guy offensively and defensively, and just hope he can stay healthy. But I am interested to see the kind of hierarchy that we get minutes-wise with all these guys.
Yeah, I like Taylor Hendricks. I thought he played a really good first game of the year last season, and then he unfortunately broke his fibula and dislocated his ankle, which was a huge bummer. But I really like his defensive versatility. I think he shoots the ball well. I think he's got some skill as like a mismatch attacker to some extent. I think he rebounds the ball well. I think he's the kind of guy who should be a solid two-way contributor as a forward for you, which is a solid outcome for the 9th pick. This is the thing, right? They were picking 9th, they were picking 10th. They weren't really shooting for the stars with Cody and Taylor. They were kind of going for like solid contributors, and we'll see if they can become that. And then just real quick on the other two guys alongside Cody who are going into year 2 for them. Isaiah Collier can get in the paint. He can finish at the rim. He's a good passer. He's a very good athlete, strong, terrible shooter, and his viability as a legit NBA player is going to totally swing on that. And I'm not optimistic because the indicators have never been decent there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I really like Collier as a prospect. He was my favorite point guard in the class. A lot of the traits I banked on, I thought shone through. The strength, the playmaking, the ability to get downhill. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to find this stat right now because I wrote it down when I was evaluating him as a prospect.
Shooting percentage outside the restricted area?
I believe it was 13%. I believe it was 13% as a prospect outside of the restricted area.
Are you serious? I didn't even realize it was that bad.
I'm trying to find it because I knew it was in my notes somewhere.
Holy shit.
I don't have it, but yeah, it was something diabolical like that. Just putrid. And so, yeah, can he shoot is going to determine if that guy can stay in the league. But I still like Collier.
I do like Flip. I thought that he was a steal in the second round. He wouldn't have fallen that far if not for his Mormon girlfriend's gaslighting him. I mean, really versatile offensive big for falling that late. But again, like, none of these guys are moving the needle, man. They're solid talents here, but the Jazz are just left without that building block, without a clear identity and direction and foundational piece, and so they are in a brutal spot, and I think they're going to be just dreadful this year, and the rebuild is not off to a good start, man. If we can speak frankly, sometimes it does come down to dumb luck and whether you get the 1st pick or the 5th pick when Cooper Flagg is in the draft, but there's a massive difference in terms of my confidence in Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey, and none of these picks, outside of Kessler, who's very good, but even he is not somebody who you view as like an upper echelon star kind of guy. He's 24 years old. He's a very good basketball player, but disappointing spot for the Jazz to be in overall. There you have it, folks. Our thoughts on the entire Northwest Division. We have 5 more divisions to preview, and we will be doing that over the next few weeks. Can't wait for basketball, Logan. When we started, right before we got going with the pod, you started screaming out, "I'm fiending for it. I'm fiending." And I said, hold on a second, because just moments before you had asked to see my cock and balls, and I thought, wow, that's very forward of you. You were talking about the basketball, though, if I could just clarify and get you to say that on the record, and please stop asking me to send you pictures of my balls.
Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do that every morning when I wake up and every night before I go to sleep. But I am fiending for this basketball, man. I cannot wait for the ball to get back. I'm jacked.
Yeah. Hell yeah, brother. I'm right there with you. We got football going on now. We got basketball coming up. We'll have a football show very soon. And then we'll have a basketball show. And then we'll have a football show. And then we'll have a basketball show. And it's going to be both, baby, till the end of time, basically. If you want to be with us for that ride, you can join us right here. Everywhere, really. YouTube, you can find all of our stuff, all of our full-length shows, NBA, NFL trivia, and some of our video breakdowns, video essays. You can listen to the podcast across all audio platforms, and you can follow us across social, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh to see graphics from the show, sometimes clips from the show, and, of course, all of our daily short-form trivia content, and some of our original takes that go only across social. So that's where we are. You can also join our community on Discord if you want to chat with the gang over there. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys so much. I've been Carson Barber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.